So my name's Mavanwi Taylor. I'm working at University College London in London, and my role today is just really to act as liaison for the Liviana online conference that's happening this week and next week, that's organized by the Community Economies Research Network that many of you will be part of or be aware of. But my role as liaison is really just to listen and to create a record of your discussions today for the benefit of anybody else in future. And that actually includes like a creative record. So I would just ask you, while you're listening and participating in the session, if there are images that come to mind for you, or drawings even, or doodles that you're making while you're listening, please share them either during or after the session. I'm going to post a little link in the chat, and I know the organizers have also got lots of nice interactive things for you to do. But as part of that, I will, obviously the session is also being recorded. So do turn your camera off if you don't want your image to be part of that recording. And we will, with your permission as well, take some screenshots of the session and also save the chat, the Zoom chat. So I just wanted to check that's okay with everybody before we begin, and I'll hand over shortly. And just lastly to say that for those of you that are not perhaps so familiar with Liviana or Community Economies Research Network, so Liviana is a self-organized conference and is trying very much not to replicate some of the problems that we know we have often in academia. So we want this to be a safe space, a nurturing space, a welcoming space. So just invite everybody to take a moment, to take a breath, to ground yourself, maybe to stretch or to move if you need to. Feel free to do that throughout the session. And perhaps while the organizers introduce the session and take us forward, if people might be able to just share in the chat, your name, where you are, and perhaps one word, how you're feeling today. So I really look forward to the discussions, and I'll be in listening mode, as I say. So I'll hand over to Tamara, Laura, and Matthias.
Hello and welcome everyone, and thanks for the introduction. We are really happy to have this session here today at Liviana. So maybe we start introducing ourselves. And the idea of this session is basically an exploration of what we want to explore in the urban south and the space-making practices, which we will explain later what we understand as that. It's an exploration for the three of us, where we found certain common aspects in our researches we are doing, and we're interested to bridge them and also open this discussion up to other people. So I'm Tamara. I'm currently a PhD candidate at the TU Delft in the Netherlands. I'm an architect and urbanist, and my research is on circular community practices. So I research how diverse people form communities around keeping resources in a loop. And yeah, we're very happy to do this session with Laura, who I met actually at the Diverse Economies Summer School, and with my colleague Matti. And yeah, you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here. My name is Matthias. I'm originally from Argentina, currently living somewhere in between the south of Europe, Italy, Spain, I'm not sure yet. But finished recently a master's in urban studies, also architect, urbanist. And I've been researching about urban informality and migration and the impact of informal work in the public space. And I met Tamara working in different placemaking, urban projects in Latin America a couple of years ago. And suddenly we realized that we were researching very similar topics. So that's the reason why we're here.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Laura. I'm a PhD candidate at the Gran Sasso Science Institute in Italy, where I'm based right now. My PhD is in regional science and economic geography, so I'm a human geographer. I did my master in human geography, and now I'm switching to economic geography, and I'm researching alternatives in the platform economy. So yeah, I met Tamara the last year during the summer school of the Community Economies Research Network. So this was a great opportunity to reconnect again and to meet Matthias, with whom we have a lot of research points in common. So yeah, I think we can start. I will switch to our Mentimeter. We have prepared this survey that you can answer. So now I will go to the Mentimeter because you can answer while I'm sharing it. Just a sec. No. Wait. So if you're all connected. We will see the answer exactly what you are answering.
I really like the animations. It's like I want to keep answering questions all the session. Okay, we do have many places.
Yeah.
Also, yeah, represent.
Pardon. Sorry.
No, yeah. Thank you. This one is a difficult one, I have to say. So take your time.
Just write what comes to your mind. No idea is nice, yeah.
Yeah, don't be shy. The first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay, inspiration. Yeah, that's good. Let's look for that.
Community, informal practices, resilience. Quite good, eh? I think we are aligned.
Oh. Wow. Nice. Go to the last one.
This is implicit. Oh. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so
yeah.
should we maybe start exploring the question of what we mean with the urban south and diverse community economies and what we want to explore there?
Okay.
All right, then I will start on defining the South. This is something I really like because considering myself from the South, I came to this term that probably most of you know, that is the Global South. That is an interesting term, also full of conflicts, but also sheds some light on different situations that happen in the world. We understand the Global South as a metaphor for underdevelopment, more situational rather than geographical. And this idea refers to an entire history of colonialism, neo-imperialism, differential economic, large inequalities that are, let's say, manifested in different living standards, life expectancy, and access to resources that is still existing today. We understand that in this frame, there are people that are negatively affected by modern capitalism and global hierarchies of power that is still existing today and are still shaping different conditions of living in the world. It also, the concept also represents the territorialized capitalism negative impacts. And we recognize that there is a South that exists also in the North, and a North that can exist in the Global South. That's why we say that it's something more situational rather than geographical. But also the concept embodies a collective identity formed from shared experience of subjugation, marginalization that occur under the current global capitalism framework. And there is like a collective identity that can emerge when various South recognize itself and understand their conditions and understand what they share, the common between them. If you want to continue.
Okay, and so starting from these complexities, we want to explore the notion of the urban South. And what we mean by the urban South is really an exploration for us at this point. But we figured out some points that we think that defines this notion. So we understand the urban South as really diverse urban spaces, which are commonly sidelined by global capitalism, but they are integral parts actually of all cities, of some cities more and of some cities less. And the urban South embody a variety of urban shapes and lifestyles, which are different from traditional Northern notions of what urbanity is. So we also question who defines what a city is and what not. And this is and was often defined in urban discourse in the North and then imposed to other contexts. And then urban South also they transcend the binaries between what is formal and what is informal. So we go beyond that, which is also for us a classification which is rooted in colonization and globalization. And instead of seeing these binaries, we see urban situations as complex, intertwined situations. And then last, but importantly, we don't see the urban South as spaces of deprivation or as victimized, but rather as spaces of otherness, diversity, resistance, and radical possibilities also. And therefore we want to explore the urban South as intriguing grounds to learn about alternative forms of urbanity. And there the diverse economies framework provides us a lens to bring to light and learn about from these diverse but often overlooked activities that characterize the urban South. And today, now this sounds very abstract, but today we will explore that with 3 case studies from our researchers to see their shared characteristics, including diverse economic activities and their approaches to space making. Yeah, next. And yeah, we are particularly interested in the spatial aspects of these diverse economic practices in the urban South. And so we ask these questions, what we can learn from these diverse practices, how they shape and how they are shaped by urban space.
Yeah, so we decide to organize our explorations around 3 main points, which are the characteristic that Tamara and Matthias have already underlined. So first of all, we concentrate around the concept of urban diversity. So the fact that we don't want to create binaries among categories, but we want to understand which are the blurry boundaries of these categories. So we do not put in a binary the global South or the global North, but we understand how this urban South can coexist. In this urban South, different categories can coexist, not in opposition. The second point of exploration is around deterritorialization and the space making. So we are looking how in urban spaces people actively shape the urban space, so how they perform specific tactics that help them to survive and how they recreate diverse economy in the urban space. So in this sense, we recognize that there is a mutual acknowledgement between these tactics, and at the same time that these experiences have to bear gain in order to survive in the everyday urban life. And the last point of exploration is around shared experience and tacit knowledge. So we recognize that our case studies are situated somehow, so they are rooted in the context where they exist and they are shaped by this context. But at the same time, the people who actively shape this urban space share among them this tacit knowledge, which help them to survive and to continuously reproduce these practices and the activity of space making.
Oh yeah, so let's bring this kind of theoretical part to our practical case study examples. And I start with Menales Terra, a recycling network in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. So this is a case study from my research. I could not yet go there. I hope to be able to go there soon. So yeah, for now it is based on secondary resources and on interviews with other researchers and people from there. But in Addis Ababa, it's estimated that about 6,000 people make their living by forming a very sophisticated citywide recycling network. And since 2005, the city administration tried to formalize waste management in the city by excluding the self-organized actors, but that kind of failed. And so today the solid waste collection in Addis is a complex network, which you can see here, of formal and informal actors, and they just work together. And there's no formal recycling network in the city. So what the city government does, it makes bin collections, so with containers, and transports to landfill. But since there is no recycling system, this is where diverse self-organized actors come in, and they find value in what others see as waste. So they collect all kinds of disposed resources, glass, metals, plastics, everything that is reusable in some way. So mostly everything except organic waste. But this is also, there are many diverse actors there involved. So there are, for example, the so-called corrales. So they go from door to door to collect from the households. They also buy some materials. And then there are scavengers who collect at the landfills. And there are waste pickers who collect from containers. And then these materials are sold to wholesalers, to middlemen, and also to small artisans or rural traders who bring materials to the countryside, and even to the local recycling industry. Especially plastic bottles are sold to recycling industry. So here in the images, you can see first how the corrales, they go from door to door to collect the materials. And then they have shared taxis to bring it to Minales Terra, which is the recycling market. And there are artisans who take these materials and transform them into something new, as you can see here on the picture. So in this network, we can see that recycling is very labor intensive and how waste can become a source of livelihood for many. So it is said that in only reselling one item, there are about 10 to 20 people involved in this process. And this network also provides an economy for the city's urban poor. So the recycled products which you can buy at Minales Terra are cheaper, and they're also custom made. So there are particular products, as these kitchen products, which you can see here, from, for example, rural cultures, which you cannot find elsewhere in the city. And it also keeps the city clean. So 60% of the city's waste is organic, and that's collected by the city government. And the rest is mostly recycled through this network. There are also tensions now, since these informal actors are not recognized by the local government. They have no power in the decision making. They have no security, often precarious working conditions. Very often, corrales might come home from a day of work without any income. And then they also have a lack of access to technology, for example. So plastic bottles, they need to be shredded. But they don't have this kind of technology, for example. Yeah, next one. And then the space making aspects of this. So the network, it works all over the city. So the corrales, they even have very defined districts where they travel through neighborhoods on a daily basis and then bring it to the recycling market, Minales Terra. So here you can see Minales Terra, which is about 5 hectares of mercato, which is the city's main open air market. And it's a complex space of relations between all these different actors, which I described before, and where everything happens in one space, which is very complex negotiations. But they developed specific spatial tactics for that. So, for example, Minales Terra, it looks chaotic here on the aerial image, but it has specific zones for specific types of trade. Maybe you know this on this kind of market. So there's the area for textiles, the area for household, for electronics, for metal recycling, and so on. And then on the second image, you see the layers of space appropriation. So this is a market stall, for example. And you see in the shaded spaces, it's for storage, but then the stalls are open and orientated toward the streets for selling. They leave a few meters for circulation. And then there's also vertically on the lower level, they still have storage in this market stall. And on the upper levels is the space for selling. Or also this person who is using the street, for example, for his activity of straightening the clothes hangers. And next. And this comes with implicit rules. So implicit rules which are agreed upon without that they are written anywhere, no? Because of course these are constant negotiations. And in a mall, for example, if you think about it, there's a dedicated space for logistics, for production, and so on. So no one has to negotiate much about space. But here, these people who are cleaning the pots, they know exactly, they work on the street, but they know exactly until where they can go, so the trucks can still pass, for example, no? And then an interesting aspect is that everything happens there in one space and nothing is hidden, for example, such as logistics. Here in the middle picture, you can see the waste collection points where then people pick out and buy stuff. And this is also in the middle of the market, or also the artisans, they work on the street, so it's very visible. And then the last thing is that it's transient and permanent activities. They happen in the same space. So yeah, there are the permanent market stalls, but then there are also things sold from trucks and so on. Yeah, next. And then there is very particular knowledge involved that grew over time in this network. So first, it's of course this highly sophisticated social, economic, and territorial organization. And then it's also very specific knowledge about the city's waste stream. So these people know exactly where to find which materials, how to repurpose them, and who might need them. And then it's also how they make spaces at Minales Terra. And a fourth very interesting part is the artisanal skills, which are involved in transforming these materials into new items. So often these are craftsmen from rural areas which come to the city and bring specific skills. And in fact, many people come to Minales Terra to learn these skills there. And that's very interesting that these things happen on the street. So they could just watch and learn by watching or having a conversation with someone. And also they produce very specific items, as you can see here on the picture, which cannot be bought in a supermarket or so. So in general, the visibility of the people who work in this recycling network, which is very labor intensive and very complex, is something very interesting. And I think we can learn a lot from that it's, yeah, working with waste, or what we call waste, is just a part of the city. While often in northern countries, what we understand as recycling is we put it in the bin with the right color, and then it is kind of out of sight, out of mind. So that's a very interesting aspect also of this network. Yeah. Let's go to the next.
All right, thanks, Samara. My research was in Palermo, in Sicily, in the very, very south of Europe, in a market called Albergheria Market, which is a street vending market that is situated in the historical center of Palermo. Just to introduce, very important to understand that Palermo has quite recently, in the last 20 years, 25 years, a migration hub, where thousands of migrants from Africa, from Asia are arriving, but historically has been a crossroad location where multiple civilizations have encountered. But also it's a place that has a long history of, let's say, marginalization, exclusion, and underdevelopment of the local population, in contrast to the industrialized north of Italy, for example. And it's also an area that's been annexed to Italy. Was an independent region before the unification of Italy. In that sense, the historical center of Palermo is going through a very new phenomenon of touristification, very, very new and very, let's say, small yet, but still looking degraded and abandoned, and showing the traces of the Second World War in the buildings, and became, in the last maybe 5-6 decades, because of this abandon, the opportunity for affordable housing for marginalized populations, including migrants, but also poor Sicilian working class. So in that context, this market emerged in an area that is called Ballarò, which is a section of the historical center that has around 25% of migrants living in the area. And they gather every day in this space, in a couple of, let's say, around 10 blocks, to sell literally anything and all the things they can find on the streets, way speaking, the things that they can receive from friends, and they literally just use the streets and the sidewalks, put a blanket and try to make some money and to survive from this selling activity, which is also an opportunity for irregular migrants that don't have any permit to work formally. And also it's an opportunity for excluded Sicilians. So what is interesting is that in the market, around 50% are Sicilians and the other 50% are migrants from different parts of the world. Next, Laura. And as I said, product street market is ephemeral. Every day pops up for like around 6 hours and it takes around 10 blocks. It disappears around after 2 p.m. It's a survival economy. Everyone who is working there earns around 5-10 euros per day. And there are also, as I say, a lot of undocumented people. And there is a very important, let's say, amount of immaterial relationships that make this market possible. Negotiations between vendors, negotiation between Sicilians and immigrants, negotiation between residents and vendors. And of course, there is a minimum, let's say, number of illicit trade shops, like people selling drugs, people selling stolen objects, bicycle, and different kind of things. That's the reputation of the market in the city of Palermo. Next, Laura. This is a spatial mapping showing the variability of the market, comparing in the left a normal day week on a Thursday, 9 a.m., which gather around 120 street vendors, and on a Sunday, which is, let's say, the peak hour of the market, around 400. So it's almost 4 times bigger, and it's spread among a much bigger surface of the neighborhood. The next one, Laura. And basically connecting with the topics that we've been talking and discussing, and the main, let's say, points of this workshop, vendors here have this shared experience that converts this market in more than a trading hub. It became a vital ecosystem that somehow is underpinning subsistence, like in the sense that many people live because of this market, but also allows many people to afford products that they will not be able to afford in other contexts. So the street vendor's role transcends the personal survival need. And that's why we say, or I say, that it becomes an ecosystem. There is also a lot of like a solidarity and mutual support. There is a sense of community that is manifested in also tacit knowledge, because local space is somehow ruled by rules that have been created from the community and also from an Sbarazzo association, which is the association that gathers all the vendors. For example, vendors many times share vending spots. So for example, if some of the vendors can go to the market one day, literally there is another vendor that takes care of the spot and even, manage and take the money and sell the products to the customers and then distribute with other vendors. And this somehow unify immigrants and also locals. And also there are something that I call material infrastructures that play a very important role in the market and in the urban landscape. That is the next slide, Laura. So are all these kind of objects that being built and created by the people that somehow become functional and fundamental for the operation of the market, from pop-up metal structures, these APE cargo bikes that are the let's say the vehicle that transport all the goods, for example, that they take or they recover from house clearance and they put to sell in the market. So in the market, you can find literally any kind of products, food, clothes, tools, literally everything. And around the market area, you can see all these objects that are not only there during the market's hour, but also all day. So somehow they also impact in the public space and they become part of the, let's say, the urban landscape. The next, Laura. Some conclusions about researching in this market, where I actually did this field work for 6 months, living in the same area, is that this shared experience of economic struggle and marginalization is somehow shared by migrants and locals that have been kind of like facing this idea of not being European enough or not being Italian enough. And also it's a situation that is even harder for migrants because there are many other vulnerabilities linked to race, but also to gender and their status of second order citizens, as Abayone say. In this area, public space become a socioeconomic arena to deploy these survival practices. So basically, public space is one of the main resources of the community to achieve their immediate needs. And in that spaces where they can practice this, what the so-called tactics, if we have time, we can talk about that later. But a public space is not a space of peace, it's a space of negotiations and tensions. And this diverge from maybe the idea of public space as the place where civility is manifested. Here, in fact, is a place that is negotiated and transformed every day through these immaterial relationships that also bond somehow the community. And the last point, linking with urban diversity, is that this diversity, what we call diversity, that is this idea of an urbanity that goes beyond formal or informal, in this case, in the south of Italy, in Sicily, is rooted in this resistance to structures that were somehow imposed from the north, and that were somehow imposed in the sense that, okay, the city should be like this, these are the rules, and you, people from the south, should adapt to this. But those kind of impositions never reflected local identities, never reflected local culture, and that's how the life that happened in the street is so different to what is expected in the sense of civility and public space. So somehow we find out that subalterns shape urban spaces, create local rules and they many times don't care about what the government is trying to design. And they somehow create this alternative urban form that of course have a lot of inequality, problems that we need to address, but also that is important to analyze or observe them beyond this dichotomy of formal and informal. And we could say, or we could start exploring different terminologies as, for example, post-formal urban spaces. That's it.
Okay, thanks a lot, Matthias and Tamara. So now I go with the last case study we are presenting. So I did my first fieldwork in Bologna, exploring a platform cooperative. So of course it may sound a bit weird to place Bologna, which is central north in Italy, within the urban south, but I think the topic I'm dealing with helps me to fit it in the urban south because I'm dealing with digitalization. Currently, this process of digitalization is happening all over the world and Europe, but in Italy, it's something very, which is still underdeveloped. We are like among European countries, Italy is one with the lowest statistics in terms of digitalization, and this is with respect both to digital infrastructures which are not developed in Italy, as well as for digital competencies and skills that we do not have in Italy, also because of quite old population which is not at ease with using digital technologies. So in my research, in my first fieldwork, I explored this cooperative of taxi drivers in Bologna. I think that the topic of mobility is very keen to discuss categories boundaries, since the taxi system is part of the urban public transport system, even though nonetheless, there is not this geographical boundary when the taxi service has to be provided. So it happens also that taxi drivers drive between regions and between provinces. At the same time, the taxi system adapts to the transformation that the city is witnessing. So Bologna, being in the center north of Italy, is trying to impose itself as a part of the neoliberal development of our country, adopting different labels, as for example, it is the city of food, as well as the capital of the data valley they are trying to establish in the city and in the region Emilia-Romagna. And this also is connected to how this transformation shape the life of these taxi drivers who understand how the city changes with relation to the clients they are serving, or the different rules that they have to respect when being workers. This is, of course, because the taxi system is a public service, so is completely regulated by the city government of Bologna. At the same time, I can say that this is a platform cooperative, because the Cotabo, the cooperative I've investigated, has kept technological innovation as the core business of their cooperative. So this is not a worker cooperative, but it is a multi-service cooperative. So taxi drivers are autonomous workers who benefit from the services that are provided by this cooperative. And the main service currently is the Radio Taxi Central, which was an incredible revolution in the taxi service. So in Bologna, the first Radio Taxi Central was created by Cotabo, the cooperative I've explored, in 1969. So only 2 years later, 2 years after the creation of the cooperative, and it represented a technological revolution for drivers and the work they were offering, as well for the service. So it completely changed the way in which drivers were working and clients could benefit from the service. So today, what the cooperative has done is to develop a complete in-house digital platform, which benefit also from an app which is developed by the cooperative. And currently, this digital platform is managed by a democratic algorithm, as they define it. And this, in this sense, the digital platform allows the cooperative members to reproduce the working space, which are the streets where the taxi exists, in the digital space. And thanks to this democratic algorithm that they have adopted, they do not compete for the rights that are requested, but they have decided to redistribute them according to certain principles, and this helps them to work, to redistribute the work and work equally during their shift. So in this sense, they have developed this tactic, which helped them to reproduce the physical space through digital technologies. Of course, Cotabo is only one of the cooperative taxi drivers in the city. There is also another one which is smaller, and for this reason, the cooperative does not have a direct dialogue with the municipality of Bologna, so they have this continuous bargain with the unions and also with the municipality, which also, of course, sometimes escalate in strikes in the city and different kind of protests. At the same time, there is this mutual recognition with other kinds of cooperatives all over the world, as for example, the cooperative of taxi drivers in New York, or the cooperative in Barcelona, where that uses the digital platforms developed by Cotabo. in this sense, when dealing with shared experience and tacit knowledge, the experience of Kotabo is strongly rooted in its context, and in the context of Bologna, and in particular of the region Emilia-Romagna, which is historically known in Italy because of the tradition of cooperativism, which of course has given this spirit to the cooperative that was created in 1967, so many years ago. But at the same time, in terms of tacit knowledge, it's very interesting the fact that the adoption of digital technologies has really impacted this sharing of tacit knowledge, because people, drivers, taxi drivers, they speak less among themselves, and they have digital technologies that provide information which were normally passed as tacit knowledge. So it's very interesting also for the cooperative itself and the practices that the cooperative adopts, how the use of digital technologies impact the spirit of cooperativism. Yes, so this was everything, I think, for our side. We have prepared a brief discussion. I think we have time to do it. If you would like to join us on the Miro board.
I copied in the chat as well. Sorry. I will put the link.
Maybe Laura, maybe you can share the Miro board on the
Yeah.
screen for people that cannot enter.
Yeah, and I share it here in the chat. So yeah, in the chat there is the link. You can access to the Miro board. I guess you're all familiar with it. You can access there. But maybe, yeah, what we actually wanted to discuss or to hear from you is, of course, first any questions or comments on what we were just talking about. But then we were interested also if you have any examples of your contexts which you can think of about diverse economic practices of the urban South. So in the beginning, we have seen very different contexts where you're connecting from. So maybe you have some interesting example from your context you want to share here with us that come to mind, or that you have been either researching or that you know from your day-to-day life in your city, or which is in the city you were born, or something similar. So yeah, that's what we are inviting for, or also questions or reactions to the presentation, of course.
Hi, I thought it was a great presentation. Some really nice quotable quotes from all three of you, and really interesting case studies as well. One thing that I think, so I work in New Delhi. I'm joining in from New Delhi for this conference. One thing that's always sort of fascinated me is, so modern ideas, or let's say more recent ideas like the 15-minute city, how that's adapted to, or how it plays out in the global South is a lot more different in that. So the tacit knowledge that all of you brought up, that it's as much about knowing the start point to the end point of delivery for services. That plays out a lot with the 15-minute city. So it's not necessarily that all services are within a 15-minute radius of houses, but it's that often services come to you in your houses in many global South cities. So your grocery people will come to you, people who sell clothes will come to your colony, people who sharpen knives, people who sell milk, eggs, all of that. It comes to residents in many cases. It's informal, but it's another way in which an entire economy is happening. And it's a very different take on the 15-minute city, because the 15-minute city is essentially that the individual has to be able to access services within a radius of 15 minutes. But I just think it's really amusing to think of all services coming to the individual in this case. Yeah, and I just thought that was an interesting thought to share. That's all. Thank you.
Well, I think, and it's thanks for the comment. I think it's also interesting to think, when we started the discussion, we were talking about this idea of like producing knowledge. What can we teach, let's say, from the south to the north, or what can we learn in the north from the south? And I think that also we need to be a bit careful about concepts in general in the urban world. The 15 minutes city, I think, is a really interesting and really good example, and I think it's very oriented into more human cities. But I also will say that we also need to kind of like try to understand if these things, as you say, are already happening in other latitudes in a different shape, in a different way. Maybe try to not frame them or force them, framing them into concepts that are becoming very popular, for example, in Europe or in the US. So I think instead of that, I kind of like I imagine that it would be awesome to produce or to create that model from India, from the universities in India, and kind of like capturing what is already going on in the city, instead of trying to kind of like compatibilize it with other bigger concepts. That's my impression. I think this happened with many other words and concepts.
Very true, very true.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting too. Thanks for the comment that you bring the 15 minutes city. I know more the context of Latin America, but there it's criticized a lot. And I think that's actually what we are discussing now, that really with these ideas of urbanity and what is a city or what is a good city, you have to be really careful, no? And it really depends just on the context, and there might be some certain goals and so on which are interesting actually for all, but then the ways how this works is just really different to every context. And then what you said now, that a city always works as a whole and as a bigger part, and then a smaller part. So that's what I'm looking at in my research. So there's this recycling market, Minalestera, but actually there's a whole network behind, where the things are coming from and where they're traveling from. Like this one market, it's just actually one space of this whole economy which is going on over the city. And then of course it's of course always interesting to look at what is already there, and that's really important. But then there are also, if you look at it closer, there are also of course a lot of challenges, and you know that now, a lot of challenges that come with that for the people. So sometimes, for example, the corrales in Addis Ababa, they have to spend money to travel over the whole city, and they travel for hours, but they actually collect nothing in a day. So yeah. Also by looking closer, you also learn about these challenges. Yeah. How is it in India, or why did you come with the 15-minute city? Is there a particular discussion on that, or?
No, so it was your idea of exactly what you were saying, the waste scrap collectors knowing who to take the waste from, where to send those services after recycling, or to take it for recycling. That point-to-point info transport, and then the informality that's involved in it. Just think of how so much is transported here. And I completely agree when you say that it's not that it's ideal, because often these people are at the short end of the stick. But it's an ingenuous way in which I feel life happens when there is so much shortcoming in the general plan geography of a city.
I will invite to the rest to put some post-its on the mirror while we speak, and also maybe to hear also some cases for example, for Europe, at the beginning, we were saying that there is also this idea of urban south, even inside what is called the global north, for example. And I think it is important because every city could have this urban south space. And I don't know if anyone has something to comment regarding this that happened in your city. Would be great to hear.
There were many participants from Germany, for example.
Don't be shy.
Or maybe I see an interesting post-it. Maybe the person wants to elaborate on it. A system of space redistribution for work based on €1 contribution.
Well, that was me. That was me.
That was okay.
That was me. Yeah, I mean, I can explain that. It's fine. And then we have some hands up. But it's basically in the case I shared, there was like a local system where the vendors pay €1 for every vending spot, and that kind of like creates a system where with that money they have something like a lottery that is like a raffle, and with that money they pay, I don't know, the cleaning of the public space, and they also kind of like do this lottery with some food, meat that they distribute every day. But it's also a way of organizing themselves, because every vendor has a number that is assigned. While every day they pay, they can count how many vendors are going every day and have some kind of like a control. But what is interesting is that it self-manage the system by the local organization. It's not like a control by the government. It's not controlled by mafia, for example, yet. And it's hope it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But that's, for example, one of the things that they do.
Interesting. There's a hand up.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
yeah, just me too. I think I really enjoyed the presentations also, and I just wanted to comment around urban diversity, where a lot of my PhD research was around economic diversity in London and how that is often missed in the kind of city plans and strategies, which just focus on very narrow sectors. So I really enjoyed your framing of, you know, southernness across the global north and south, as it were, and kind of developing these underside views of so-called global north cities. Because what, you know, in London, what's happening is, you know, quite extreme displacement, commercial displacement of small businesses whose uses and functions are not valued. So that's something I've done, yeah, quite a lot of action research, actually, collaborative action research with small businesses and communities facing displacement. And I also find the diverse economy is really helpful in developing a reading of those economies and making sense of their politics. So yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation. You open up, and hope we can maybe discuss further afterwards. I will make some comments on the Mira Award as well.
Great. Wow, super interesting that that this was your PhD research, actually. And yes, we were thinking a lot about that. No, this actually, yeah, this, it's not geographical. No, also in the so-called northern cities, there are actually many, yeah, what we call here souths, no, and these tensions then, especially which arise in these systems, are something we have been discussing a lot, no, and that's why the two cases from Italy actually, very interesting,
Yeah, and I think that is what is important is also to take a look to cities also through a post-colonial lens, in the sense that we can also understand how these definitions of what is the right city, the modern city, versus what is the chaotic, favela, disorganized idea is rooted in this kind of like urban knowledge, and where is this knowledge produced, and where are these concepts produced. So in that sense, that also sheds some lights in cases and phenomena that happen inside the European Union and that happen also in the context of the incorporation of the peripheries of Europe, and how cities are also different in the south of Italy, in the south of Spain, in the borders of the EU. And that also kind of like, I think it's important to understand and to kind of like break this hierarchy of this ideal modern city versus other urbanities that happen in the world and that are not in a lower level, let's say. Okay. In case anyone is interested, here is a handbook on resisting commercial displacement, which was one of the collaborative optus of my PhD. Thank you.
Amazing, yeah. Amazing.
Any other comment? Lara, you want to add something? Oh, okay, Esra. Yeah, go ahead.
No, Lara can go first. Like, I'll wait.
No, I just wanted to underline, yeah, I agree with what you were saying. I think it's interesting also, like, for example, in my case study, it's clearly not a south, like as we normally understand it, using our categories and concepts. But it's also interesting, I think, to like going deep into a concept to understand how different issues and topics can be like marginal when discussing also a specific topic in the urban space. As for example, in my case study, not only the transport system, but also the digitalization process. So I think, yeah, we can like, I love this idea of like investigating the diversity within the urban and how we can recognize like the South and the marginalized, even when we are dealing with the common global North. Esra, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, my question goes in the same direction, namely, I've been, as I was listening to your wonderful presentations, I was thinking, how can we translate the concept of the South into geographies of the global North, or what are the limits of that also? And because I see the risk or the danger of kind of racializing certain diverse economic practices and subjects in this context. So that kind of, for example, thinking of Berlin, I can think of examples, for example, where immigrant women from Thailand have been kind of self-organizing, cooking in a park in the west of the city, and it has become really famous. And now it's called the Thai Park, or informally, because it's associated with Thai immigrants. So there's a kind of ethnicization that goes hand in hand with that sometimes. But if I think of another practice of, for example, people putting up on the street just shelves of books, open libraries, where anyone can put in a book or take away a book, that's kind of another example of sharing and making space differently, but doesn't really connect to the maybe concept of the South. Or if I think of people collecting bottles for that have you can recycle and get money if you return the empty bottle. So that has really increased a lot in Berlin since the kind of income support levels have gone down. So it's a direct consequence of the changes in the welfare state and increasing poverty and social inequality within the city, and that has an ethnic or kind of immigration dimension, but it's not limited to that. So would we call the bottle collectors part of the South in Berlin, or does that even make sense? So it's an open question, and I would like to hear people's thoughts on that.
Yeah, It's very interesting what you say. I think two things that we also discussed as a group come to my mind, and one thing is we discussed diverse economies out of need and diverse economies out of desire, which are kind of two different things, right? So maybe the book sharing is more a thing out of desire because we have certain values, because we have certain ideologies, and we think it's important to share stuff. And the other thing is a diverse economy out of need, actually, which came with also, the economic crisis in many countries in Southern Europe, and in Germany, as you say, the bottle collectors, for example. So this is one thing we discussed a lot, and we are not sure so much yet about that, how to involve that. And the second thing is, which we also discussed, which is the kind of formalization of the informal. So when you have this kind of self-organized diverse economies going on, as the women, the Thai women cooking in the park, and then they become formalized, so introduced to certain systems we have, planning systems, legal systems, and so on, which we have in our cities, then that's usually a very difficult point, no? So I have this case study also of Barcelona, where there was over centuries actually also a market of scavengers, so of people who collect stuff and resell it on a street market. And this market became a municipal market with a fabulous building and so on. And it was a fantastic transformation for some of the vendors, but many of them stayed out because many of these people didn't have papers and so on, so they couldn't be part of this new system. So that's, these is another point which we discussed a lot, the formalization of the informal, or when you impose certain self-organized systems into other systems. Yeah.
And I agree that the example of the books, the sharing books on the streets in comparison to other examples as, for example, street vending market, is a really interesting example. And I agree that also, let's say, informal practices are highly racialized, depending the subjects that perform the activities and the kind of activities and the place where they are performed also, because it's not the same in a street vending market in Berlin than in Sicily, for example, also because of the history of the population, which are also subjects that the locals are also racialized, even inside their own country. But I think it's also interesting, this kind of like a connection between informality and race, because it seems that some informal activities that take place on the streets today are more associated with DIY, the placemaking, and all these kind of practices that are usually performed by white, highly educated people in general. And when other populations perform those activities, suddenly they become illegal, out of order, and disruptive, corrupting like a certain order of the city. And I think that's a really interesting point to discuss about, and probably that could be another workshop, an entire workshop. But thanks for bringing up, because it's one of the topics that we also been talking, like race and ethnic groups are highly associated with this idea of informality. And also that's why I was saying that the post-colonial lens is very important, because tagging or labeling informal urbanity to what happened in the South, usually in cities that are associated or that suffer racialization, is part of the same. It's part of how the term informality is also loaded with this race bias and race discrimination. So thanks for bringing up. I don't know if we have any other comments. I see the mirror is quite full now.
Yeah. If someone wants to comment on their, or there's
Lily.
Lily, yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
I was also immediately thinking about people collecting bottles in Berlin. And I also thought about like the unspoken local knowledge that is involved in this. Is I think that people put their bottles next to the bin, especially for people who collect bottles, which I think is very beautiful. And also people that collect bottles being like of use to the community as a whole in like cleaning up parks and stuff. So I think that would also maybe fit in there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's actually I'm living in the Netherlands now since 2 years, and it's very recently that this also I observe it here just in my day-to-day life that this started, and very recently in the Netherlands people started putting their bottles next to the bin. This is actually something new here right now. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's this example of plastic collection is like very connected to what Samara was saying about informal and formal. So the fact that on the one side, this process of collecting bottles and having back money is something very formalized. So like governments know that people will use these tools to collect money, and on the other side there is this informal side of like leaving the bottles near the machine in order to like as a tactic to somehow share this value that is collected. No.
Yeah, maybe something really interesting that comes to my mind now. I have not studied bottle collectors in Germany or the Netherlands. I don't know more about them, but it seems to me, maybe someone here knows more about it, that it's a very individual activity. It seems to me at least that, you know, they are going out on their own, maybe with a friend, but they are collecting the bottles and bring them there. No, but just the difference, which is like in these networks I'm looking at, they are highly organized and everyone has a specific task. Everyone has even a specific area for collection, and there are actually different tasks involved into these processes. So maybe that's an interesting difference, that there it seems to be me a very individual activity within these northern cities of bottle collectors, for example. Yeah, but I don't know more about it.
We have Luisa.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, I'm Luisa. I'm coming from Berlin too, and I want to say something about the individualized bottle collectors. Actually, I talked to a bottle collector recently and train, and he made he really changed also my perception or my image about the bottle collectors activity, because he was like talking about the collective structures of bottle collectors in Berlin. And he was going there from another city. He was like coming from from a small city in the eastern part of Germany to go to Berlin to collect bottles with his colleagues. And they had very also like rules about like what kind of like which area belongs to whom, and
Yeah.
and also like, but it was also a very social activity actually for him. I think he's not speaking for every bottle collector because there's so many, and I think there's so many also different layers of or social layers of doing that. But he really changed my mind. And he was also saying like there's like exchanging or knowledge about like what kind of trolley you use, how you build it, and like being very interchanging knowledge of bottle collectors.
Yeah, interesting to know. Yeah, that's very interesting. That was just actually what I was wondering about. So see, the superficial perception was not right. Yeah. I think I mean, I don't know, we could go on with this, but I think we're 20 minutes over. So what do you think we should be closing?
I think, and I'm gonna extend this conversation if you really want to share more. On Monday, we're gonna have this session in Spanish, actually, at 7 p.m. European time, 3 p.m. Argentina time. So if you want to continue this and you feel you speak some Spanish, or maybe Zoom has a translator right now, I don't know, probably yes, it does. But we can continue that conversation on Monday.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. If the organizers are happy to close at this point, then perhaps, yeah. Because I mean, it's obviously a really rich conversation that you've opened up, which is wonderful. So hopefully maybe someone can post the link to the session on Monday you just mentioned in case
yeah,
register for that. And I guess you're leaving the Miro open, are you, for, yeah. And again, just to invite anybody that wants to share any images or further reflections to contact the organizers, or indeed me for the Liviana record side of things. Perhaps everybody, the organizers, could just put their emails as well in the chat for anyone to do that who's not able to come on Monday but didn't get a chance to share what they would like with you. So I will make my record available to the organizers and to Liviana, of course, and yeah, just encourage as well everybody, you know, who's perhaps joining this Liviana conference for the first time to perhaps take a look at the conference program and see if there's anything else that you want to join over the next few weeks. So perhaps I can just put that in the chat. Is there anything you want to say, Tamara, Matthias, or Laura, to close while I do that?
Thank you very, very much for yeah, for this interesting discussion now, and to hear from different parts of the world. I mean, to hear from Delhi and from Berlin. For us, it's an exploration, as we said. So we were also really happy that, yeah, we saw, yeah, that people connected to these ideas. I think that's very good for us. Yeah, join on Monday if you want. We left our contacts in the chat. Contact us for anything, and thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining and like participating also to our discussion, or the discussion we wanted to bring forward. So
yeah, also want to say thank you to the organizers and also to the people that assisted. It's been a pleasure, and it's been like an interesting also exercise for us to discuss these topics between the team, but also with everyone who came to today. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank you for organizing it.
Good day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
bye.